Hi, this is Erica Norton, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video. I'm very excited to have with us today Attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. She owns a real estate and family law firm in the Worcester area, and she and her team are fantastic at what they do. And we are very fortunate to have Nicole with us every week talking about the do's and don'ts of the law and these two types of law. And today we're going to talk about something really interesting um, and in an area of the law that a lot of people get confused and tied up with. And so welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. So today we'll talk about probate, and everybody dies. So this is really a topic for everyone. If you have people that are loved ones that you either care for, or maybe care for you, or are going to need care in the future. Um, it's really good to know what needs to happen to make everyone's life easier in the long run if someone were to pass. That's what we're looking to talk about today, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's an important topic because, we don't want to think about it. And sometimes it's, well, whatever, I'm dead. I don't care. And you take that approach, but the reality is everyone else is going to pick up the pieces. And if you're not clear, or if you're going to an attorney that doesn't understand, or if you're trying to fumble and do it yourself through the court, you're going to run into a lot of problems. So we're hopefully going to avoid some of those.
And that is the kind of information we need. So let's talk about some of the things that we should have in place to make probate go easier after somebody passes.
Well, obviously, the easiest one is to have a will. You have a will, it at least dictates who's going to be in charge. It also dictates who's going to get what. So that's an easy one. The problem is if you don't have it, then again, everyone's kind of scrambling or everyone's waiting for, oh, she'll do it. No, she'll do it. Well, why don't you do it? And so you run into a situation where everyone else is going to do it and nobody's doing it. And now you're going, but I want my money. Well, then somebody's got to do it. So hopefully you have a will that's going to tell you who's in charge. But if not, then you're going to have to figure out who is going to do it. And sometimes that means you're going to have to take the initiative yourself.
No, I mean, it's really tricky. In my family, my mother side had nine siblings, and some of them have children, and some of them don't. And, some of them have passed already, and, we don't have to worry about that. But we do have some that are really old and they've got Alzheimer's. We've got a couple like that. And, one of them didn't have children at all to help take care of it. So two of the first cousins of of myself had to go step in and take on that role. And it's not an easy role, to get things set up and help people um, when they're going through these phases of their life, these later phases.
Absolutely. And you just got to remember that later phases aren't always what it's cracked up to be. Sometimes it happens earlier on in life. So realistically, I'm going to tell you, you should get a will when you're 25 and you should update it every 5 to 10 years. But certainly, once you reach a certain age, and maybe that age is around 60 ish, but you need to make sure you absolutely have it at that point in time. But realistically, again, should have it starting at 25.
I mean, that's really interesting that you say that because I know 70-year-olds that still don't have their will. In fact, most people that I know do not have their will. And every time you mention it, they're like, oh, I got to do that.
They always say it and then they never do. Oh, I'll get around to it. Great. When? And unfortunately, like I said, I don't know when you're going to get in that car accident. I don't know when life is going to cut you short. I have no idea. But I do know that at least have the preparation and wherewithal to do it sooner rather than later because all too often people want to wait and then they do have dementia or Alzheimer's and they can't do it anymore.
I know. And once it's too late, then you're really going to have to get lawyers and you're going to have to get the government involved. And whoever's taking care of them now, and there's a lot of nightmares that can happen. And it's funny because even people who have had a hard time and have horror stories, I know people like this, and they still don't have their own wills set up, and they've already gone through it, and it's terrible.
It really is. And like I said, it's one of those things that it's hard to deal with because when you're in this situation, you're like, well, why did they just do that? Well, great. And then I was asking them, I go, well, do you have your will done? Oh, no, you're right. I should really come back and see you after this is done. Okay. And again, after this is done, they've moved on. Oh, I don't have time for it now. So there's never a perfect time. So really, again, stop making excuses and just get it done.
And one of the myths that was always playing in my head and why I didn't get done. Now, I did get it done. I used you. You're fantastic with this. Um, I did this when I was about 45 or 46, going through a divorce, and decided that it was time to be a grown up and, make sure that my child was taken care of, and that, the house is going to go to the right person, and that sort of thing if something happened to me, and I have a business and all of that. And, I was surprised. I thought it was going to be really expensive, really difficult to do. And, really it is a long list of questions, and it's like all these different scenarios, and you have to kill off everyone to make sure that if you leave something to someone and that person's no longer with us, then you got to have a second and a third and a fourth backup plan. And there's backup plans for everything with a will, which is a really great way to strategize, which is really what it is. It's a strategy for what happens to your stuff after you leave. And you want to make sure that your things and your pets and your children and everything is going to, you know, people that you trust and that you intend for that stuff to go to.
Absolutely. And again, that's why I'm going to look at it every 5 to 10 years because life changes. People do pass away. You're like, wait a minute, I'm going to leave who, guardian? No way. Maybe they had a drug problem that you didn't know about it and now it came to light. Like there's things that you're going to find out and you don't know when, again, that's going to happen. So you just want to make sure that you plan. I think the other thing is, all too often people think about, oh, well, I have a healthcare proxy or I have a power of attorney. Great. Those terminate upon death. So a lot of times they'll have one or two of the documents and not the third document. But again, a healthcare proxy and a power of attorney terminate upon death. The will comes into place upon death. So, people so often want to use it and go, well, I'm going to continue doing it because I've been paying all the bills all along. You don't have any authority now. You need to have a new document that gives you that authority. So again, I think that's one of the big things that people don't think about and realize that, well, wait a minute, I've always done it. Well, great, until somebody catches you and gets you in trouble.
I know, and that's the sad part, and sometimes people aren't honest, and so some of those people are just kind of living off of you, and you don't even realize it. But you had made a comment at one point, because we've talked about all of these law topics in so many different lights and so many different using so many different lenses, looking at it from every direction. And one of the things that you said was, if you're going to give someone the power of attorney, do it while you have your brain and you have your wits about you, because you give them a little bit of the power now and access to certain accounts, and you make sure that they're going to be honest with it, because some people that are normally fantastic family members, uh, that kind of responsibility and temptation may be too great, and it's good to find that out while you can still make those changes.
Absolutely. And again, you gotta be cautious. I mean, the reality is you hope that the person you trust is going to do the right thing. And so every so often you'll get somebody that goes, well, I just want my financial advisor to take care of it. Okay. Or I want my attorney to take care of it. Okay, not ideal, but again, at least these are people that have some kind of ethical code that they're going to adhere to. All too often, your brother, great. but he's in a bind right now, and he really wants that money, and he's going to get it anyway. So why don't I just take it in a little bit of advance now? And that's kind of, and I'm really projecting because it doesn't always happen, but it's things like that that you really have to think about is what's going on in their lives today. And again, great if everything's hunky dory, but in 5 years, when you're on your deathbed and he's going through a divorce, things may change.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It's sad but true. And you hear about those stories time and time again. And it's the other thing that's really unfortunate, I think, about wills in general and whether you have one or not. I mean, it just the fighting that can sometimes happen with the remaining family members and people that were close and enjoyed growing up and starting to grow older together no longer talk because things weren't handled the right way. And I mean, I know not everyone talks about what's in their will, but I feel like when in any situation, when somebody knows what to expect or an idea of it, then it's not a shock when it happens, and it's not gonna cause a lot of fallout if people already know, and then you're still alive and able to help people talk through it or, give them reasons for it. I mean, I'm sure some people are like, who cares? I'll be dead. Let them fight about it. But unfortunately, some of those fights just last for the rest of their lives and the whole family breaks up.
And I advise my clients to do exactly what I told you not to do, which was don't tell anyone. Don't tell them. Because great, you're going to start World War III while you're alive. Let them deal with it after you're dead. The reality is, you know what? It's none of their business. And the reality is, if you change your will based off of what somebody's saying, maybe it is something that you're really like, well, yeah, wait a minute, I shouldn't be leaving this person out. But maybe you're doing it intentionally. Maybe you're doing it for a reason. And now you're going to have this person kind of beating you down on a daily basis until you change your will. And that's what they'll do is they will literally torture you. So my answer is it's none of their business. Nobody needs to know. But I will say this, a lot of times what people forget about is, I have a stepdaughter and I have a daughter. Well, of course they're going to get it, right? Nope. Unless you put it in the will, that stepdaughter is getting nothing. Biologically, that child is not yours. So that child will be excluded. And, if you have a married couple situation and you're assuming, well, yeah, but, he's going to die first. Great. Then if he dies first and it's not your child, that child again is going to be excluded. So you want to make sure that if that's something that you want to do and you want to include a stepchild or a half sibling or whatever that relationship is that doesn't fall into the hierarchy of intestate law, then you want to make sure that it's included in a will. Because all too often people go, oh, well, of course I'm going to take care of them. Great. But if the will doesn't say it, you don't have that authority. And so if you violate the will, you sometimes can be removed as a person in charge, or you could have to give all the money back. So you really want to make sure that you're doing what is right and in accordance with the document. And that there is a document, because that's the other part of it. Again, if there isn't a document, then that stepchild is getting nothing.
Well, I will say this. I guess to each their own on that. I can see where you wouldn't want to deal with somebody's arguments and beating you down. And also, if you're kind of an older person, there could be some elder abuse going on when it comes to that. So I guess it does depend on the situation. Right now, everyone in my will knows what they're getting. And there's only two people, so I don't really have to worry about a lot of fighting, and they're going to split it 50-50. But, if I was older and I had a larger family and I had to worry about, I not splitting things evenly, then I guess, yeah, I guess that's a good idea too. don't put yourself out. Don't worry about it. Um, but that's really good advice then. I mean, I just have to look at your situation. So you have somebody that is in charge of making sure that the will is followed. And that person is called a personal representative. And so if you find out you're the personal representative, like, then what?
Well, then you definitely want to make sure that you're talking to an attorney or you understand exactly what your role is. All too often, people go, okay, great. So that means I just get to write out checks, right? No, that's part of the job, but there's so much more to it. And the reality is, you have to follow the will, and it's read paragraph by paragraph. So you don't get to go to step 5 and then go back up to step 1. You have to read it in order first and foremost. And it has to be specific. If it says, I leave my TD bank account to Jane Smith, but all of my accounts are in Bank of America, then Jane Smith gets none of that. If I say, I left my TD bank account ending in 635, but all I have is 831, guess what? Not getting it. So you really need to be very specific when they say that. Not they just say all my bank accounts and don't say where, then obviously that person would get. So you really need to understand what it is your obligation is and read that carefully, because if you misread it or don't understand it, then you can be on the hook for getting that money back from Jane Smith, or more importantly, you're going to end up having to pay it to the estate yourself. In which case, of course, you could also be removed as personal representative because you did something wrong. What else you don't want to do is pay out of your own pocket. You need to pay the money from the estate money. And sometimes that's easier said than done. Sometimes, all we have is a house. We didn't have any bank accounts. How do I do that? Well, then obviously we're going to have to sell the house at some point, and we're going to have to make the distribution from there. And then at that point, you're going to have to take it out of your personal funds and then reimburse yourself. But you have to have a full accounting of that. So the reality is you want to close out all of the decedent's estate accounts and put it in one account that you are listed as personal representative on, and then you're going to pay all of the bills out of that one account, and you're going to keep a full accounting of everything. That's what you need in order to make sure that you're doing everything properly. The other thing is, don't make disbursements quickly, because again, if you make them too quickly and there's a lien on the account or there's a lawsuit, you may have to pay those debts. And again, it's hard to get money back from a third party when you've already dispersed it. So you really want to make sure that you're understanding your role and the timeliness of any disbursements or any allocations that are necessary.
It's all fun and games until you have to pay someone else's bills out of your own account. So yeah, I mean, absolutely get an attorney to advise you, because like Nicole, you know how this goes. This is something you deal with every single week for your clients, and you know how it was supposed to be set up ahead of time. You know how to correct some of the mistakes, and all of the mistakes, I would assume, the ones that can be corrected, because some things that don't get set up correctly in the beginning can't be corrected. And also, really the procedure of things is just so important. And the consequences are, you do get punished in several different ways, and certainly the punishment could come right out of your pocket.
Absolutely. You have to remember that the consequences can be dire, and the reality is the court can order you to immediately pay it back. Somebody could be pressing criminal charges against you as well for larceny, because that's what it is. So, you really got to make sure you understand your obligation. Now, that being said, it's a great honor and it's something that you should do. You just need to understand what you're doing and have proper advice before you go and just do it.
I mean, so we've covered a lot that has to do with the do's and don'ts of probate. And are there ways to avoid? I mean, I just hear so many nightmares that where somebody got a house in the will, but it sits in probate until, sometimes for a year, just trying to make sure that, the process goes smoothly and that everything gets done right. I've heard that putting your house and your accounts and all of that, sometimes people set up a trust so that they can put someone on the accounts. They can have somebody that can access the accounts through the trust because they're a trustee, and sometimes that makes them able to access funding quicker. But obviously, you still have to make sure the bills are paid if somebody passes. I mean, have you heard that this is one of the ways to avoid the lengthy probate process?
Well, if you have a trust set up, then all the assets that are in that trust are going to go outside of probate and you don't even have to worry about it. So that's a great way to avoid probate altogether. But if assets are in probate, then you can't necessarily put them in trust unless the probate or unless the will specifically dictates that all the money is going to be put in the trust.
That's one way to make things go a little smoother. Are there any other suggestions that you might have for people in this case? Because I know that there's just so many stories. The less you have set up ahead of time, the more headaches and fees and time that it's going to take your family.
I think, one of the biggest things that I always like to talk to my clients about is, if you're doing your will with somebody, ask them if they will probate the will. Is that attorney going to be the same attorney that is ultimately going to help you or your family probate the estate? Or I got Jane Smith that did the will, and Jane Smith isn't going to go in court and she doesn't litigate anything, even if it's uncontested. Now I got to go find another attorney. And so now you're kind of fumbling around and trying to find another attorney. So, it's always a good question to ask somebody and say, well, if I come to you and I, have the will drafted up, will your office probate it? The answer here is yes, of course we will.
And that's because this is one of the things that you specialize in. And that's why it's really important to use people that know what they're doing. Um, it's often not the best idea to go. I mean, we talk about like picking the right attorney for things all the time. And it's often not the best idea to go to a one-man shop and unless they just specialize in that one thing. A lot of times when people start off in law, they're trying on different hats, and they might, do some car accidents, and then they might do some wills, and then the next week they might be trying to help out with a divorce, and but there's only one person working there. So you don't want to get caught up with somebody that isn't able to, doesn't have the time to keep up with all the changes in the law. So we talk about changes in the law all the time, and that can really trip an attorney up if they don't have time to take those continuing ed classes and research what's happening and what's new in the law that year.
Absolutely. And I think, again, the big things is just knowing what you can handle as an attorney, but, ask questions. What is your experience? What do you know? I mean, just because we're just like realtors. Realtors, I just found out today, there are 77,000 in the state of Massachusetts alone. But only 22,000 of them are brokers. It's the exact same thing with attorneys. Well, there's a lot of us out there, but do you know the attorney that actually knows what they're talking about? Ask the pertinent questions. Feel free to interview the attorney that you're talking to see if they understand what the law is.
And do they have a supporting staff? I mean, when I work with you on different things, I know that you have other attorneys, but also you have a staff. So you are great at, these three areas of the law. You work with family law, you work with real estate, you work with wills and trusts, but you have a support staff and you have other attorneys that can cover for you when you're off doing other things. So it's not like I ever have to call your office and not hear from you for weeks. Somebody calls me back the same day, as long as I'm calling at a reasonable time. I'm not going to expect that at 5 o'clock, or over a weekend. But it's very reasonable. I definitely hear back within 24 hours to 48 hours. Usually a lot quicker than that. And with some of these places, you may have to call a few times, and you don't want to feel like you have to cold call somebody to give them the business and to get your work done for you. I mean, that's never a good feeling, and I think that it really um, takes a lot of confidence that you might have away from the job that they can do, and that's definitely a red flag to look out for.
Absolutely. And I just had a client come in today who says, "Yeah, I want to get rid of my attorney." And I'm, ask the questions why. Well, because he was going on vacation and then he came back for like 2 days. And then he said he was going on another vacation. And then he's going on another vacation. And so she's telling me the story. And he had literally said to her, he's been on 6 different vacations and really hasn't done any work on her case in 4 months. Well, again, that tells me something else more is going on. Whether or not it's really vacations or not, but you want to make sure that you're going to have an attorney that's responsive.
I mean, I think that's really great. Is there anything else that you would want to watch out for when you're working on probate and preparing possibly to have to deal with that?
I think the biggest thing is just, again, to have that conversation with your attorney. One of the things that clients like to do is pay bills. Stop paying bills. I will tell you what bills that we need to pay. But all too often, clients go, "Well, I got this bill for a credit card." So it's the decedent's credit card. You don't pay that. So you really want to make sure that you understand what your obligations are. Yes, you do have certain obligations. Yes, you have to pay the funeral home. You have to pay mass health. There are people you absolutely need to pay. And then there's other people that get deferred to a period of time later on and may or may not get payment.
I mean, and that's great to know. Well, Nicole, thank you so much. This has been very helpful, very informative. It's not good to hear. I don't want to say good to hear, but it's good to know about the mistakes that other people make so that you can avoid that in the future. It's terrible that they had to go through it, and we certainly all make our own mistakes, but if we can avoid it, especially things that can be as expensive as this, both with time, money, emotion, when you're dealing with something like probate, then I'm all for that. And I'm happy that you could give us this information today and really help out in the future. So if anyone needs an attorney to help walk you through wills, how to avoid probate headaches in the future, please give Nicole Reeves Lavallee and her team a call. They are fantastic. If you are in the Massachusetts area, really, they are out of Worcester, but you can ask about if they're willing to go to your area. So thank you so much today, Nicole. We really appreciate your help.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you, everyone. Have a great day.